Nicholas Latifi looks to have had his one and only home Grand Prix in Formula One, as it's that time of year again. The summer break is coming up exceptionally quickly and everybody is talking about driver moves specifically for the 2023 season. It's contract talk, who's staying, who's leaving, and where are we going to be when 2023 begins. Taking a deeper look at the contract situation up and down the grid, you can actually see that over half of the grid already have their contracts signed for 2023 already, although after McLaren made comment about Daniel Ricciardo's contract for 2023 not being watertight, that just reminds us that in Formula One, if you don't deliver, even though you've got a contract for next year, doesn't really mean anything. I think the only person who's genuinely fully safe is Max Verstappen with that 2028 contract extension for Red Bull. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, that all of the 2023 drivers that are contracted so far do end up staying. That leaves Alonso, Vettel, Tsunoda, Latifi, and Zhou that are completely out of contract in Formula One, as well as Schumacher, Albon, and Stroll. And it's a little bit more murky with those three because they obviously have a parent company too. So, for instance, Albon is out of contract with Williams, but might still have a behind-the-scenes contract with Red Bull in some way, and Red Bull might be able to find him a seat at a different team or be able to introduce him as a test driver in the Red Bull or AlphaTauri setup as well. But with all that being said, let's talk about that man, Nicholas Latifi, who I think is probably the most likely driver to lose his seat for the 2023 season. The rumour mill has already started about the Canadian man being replaced as soon as the summer break, some people are saying, and I don't think it's going to come that early, but you can definitely see why Williams might want to look in a different direction. It has not been the vintage year for Nicholas Latifi in 2022. He came into the season, he was really positive. Obviously, George Russell moving out of the team, Alex Albon coming in as his new teammate. He talked about how he wanted to be the number one driver at Williams. He wanted to show why Williams had held on to him for this 2022 season, and he thought that the new regulations would give him the opportunity to really build on his Formula One career so far, coming into his third season in Formula One, and it hasn't quite happened for him. He's now sitting stone dead last, actually 21st in a 20 driver championship, with Nico Hülkenberg being above him. Also one of only two drivers not to pick up any points this season, and just to compile the misery, he also has the lowest average finishing position of any driver on the entire grid. And as always in Formula One, the one person you have to always beat is your teammate. And Alex Albon has a massive advantage over Nicholas Latifi at the moment. He is 8-1 up in terms of qualifying. He's constantly finishing above Nicholas Latifi in the races as well. And not just by a little bit, to a heavy extent. He is finishing seconds up the road, positions ahead of Nicholas Latifi, and is actually taking tenths out of Nicholas Latifi every single lap. Just look at these lap times for the Canadian Grand Prix. Alex Albon is chunking time out of Nicholas Latifi every single time around, and looking at their fastest laps in particular in Canada, you can just see their night and day. 0.6 seconds between Nicholas Latifi's fastest lap and Alex Albon's fastest lap of that Grand Prix. So we can see why Williams are maybe looking forward as Alex Albon being their number one driver and possibly looking for somebody else to replace Nicholas Latifi. It's just then, who do you get to replace Nicholas Latifi? And the man who seems to be on top of everybody's list is Oscar Piastri, and for very good reason. Let's delve into his last 3 seasons, because 2019 he was the Formula Renault champion, 2022 he was the Formula 3 champion, and in 2021 he went on to win the Formula 2 championship. And I genuinely think if Renault or Alpine had connections with anybody else on the grid, if they didn't just have those 2 seats, he would already be in Formula 1 and already be establishing himself as that next generation of Formula 1 driver. As it is, he's the test driver for Alpine this year and is looking for a seat in 2023, and I personally think the Williams move would be a great move for Oscar Piastri. Let's look at this from both perspectives, because I think if you're looking at it from Oscar's perspective and Williams' perspective, is slightly different. In terms of how Oscar should be looking at this, he should be absolutely going for that Williams seat, in my opinion. We've looked at drivers like George Russell, who's been in that seat for the last 3 years, was in there, didn't have to do too much. When you're in a Williams car, as long as you're performing on a Saturday and you're really putting your heart and determination into the car, if you're not binning it into the wall, you're not under too much pressure. And we saw George Russell really thrive in that Williams situation, and when he got that opportunity to step onto Mercedes, he's been absolutely phenomenal this year. Similar with Alex Albon coming in 2022. I think he's completely reignited his Formula 1 career and looks like he's going to be a stalwart of the Formula 1 grid for years to come. I think Williams would be silly not to keep hold of Alex Albon, and I think Piastri could do a similar sort of thing. He could go to Williams, really bed his teeth in Formula 1, be in that environment where there's not too much pressure to deliver every single weekend. Just get yourself a really stable car and put yourself in and amongst it, try try and get those points if you possibly can, but there's not too much pressure to do so. And then when that seat at Alpine becomes available, then you step up into it. Or if that seat doesn't become available at Alpine, you've got the rest of the grid to step up into, because Williams, I don't think, are going to take that many steps forward over the next few years, and therefore any team looks like an upgrade in comparison to Williams. And then you look at it from a Williams perspective, and genuinely, it looks like one of the best drivers that they could possibly pick up. Like, how many drivers have won back-to-back championships and not taken the step straight into Formula One? Like, Williams could pick up an absolute gem if they pick up Oscar Piastri into their team. And secondarily to that, it just builds more connections, especially when you're a team like Williams that's trying to rebuild, that's currently sitting bottom of the Constructors' Championship, doesn't look like they're going anywhere too fast, only has 3 points this season. You've got links to Mercedes because you're a Mercedes powered team, and obviously they've been working really closely with Mercedes. You've got links to Red Bull if you want to go down that path, and maybe the Honda Red Bull engine becomes something incredible in the future, and maybe you can start to nab things from there because you've got the links with Alex Albon. Then on top of that, you're also building a route to Renault. Maybe you want to become that Renault partner team. Maybe you want to take in some other Renault juniors as they come through in the future and build your team around the Renault engine. It just builds such a map for Williams to build off of, and they can learn so much from so many other teams where lots of doors are locked in Formula One and you don't get to see the behind the scenes of lots of teams. But Williams, because they're in this position where they're not battling for titles, they can make these links to all of these other teams, and bringing in Oscar Piastri just makes those links with Renault incredibly strong. So for me, I think the deal should be done between Piastri and Williams. I think they should make that as soon as they possibly can. But I think the one thing that is getting in the way of Williams really committing to this, and Alpine really committing to this, is Fernando Alonso. Just to quickly touch on the Spaniard, obviously, if he steps out of Formula One, Alpine would be silly not to take Piastri into their own team and have Esteban Ocon beside him, use Esteban Ocon for the next couple of years to really build Piastri into the team, and then we can see whether Piastri is Formula One worthy and whether or not he can take that mantle from Esteban Ocon as the top driver in that team. But just to quickly touch on Fernando Alonso, I think he will stay in Formula One next year. I know that he's 41 years old. I know that he's been doing it a very, very long time, but he said himself, it's not about age, it's about performance. Now, if you just look at the points for Fernando Alonso, you wouldn't say that he's absolutely smashing it out of the park. He's currently 21 points behind his teammate Esteban Ocon after just 9 races. But actually, if you delve into the performances this season, he's been very, very good. There's been 2 DNFs that were completely out of his fault in Saudi Arabia and Imola. There's been a 17th place in Australia that again kind of came down to the fact that the car didn't work in qualifying and then didn't seem to come together in the race either over the course of that weekend. And then in Miami, he lost out because of a couple of penalties. And then similarly, he lost out on a 7th place finish last weekend in Canada because of a penalty. So it's been a few things that haven't quite gone his way, and those points that have slipped away from him. He's still been able to finish in the points 5 out of the 9 races so far with an average finishing position of 9.86. He's young, he's fit, no problem. Which means it's looking pretty bleak for the Canadian driver, and I think Nicholas Latifi will be the first casualty of the 2022 season. But I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments down below. Do you think Nicholas Latifi is going to be the first driver to leave the grid before 2023? And also, whilst you're down there, I'd love to know your thoughts on which driver you'd like me to do a deep dive on next. As I said, there's 6 other drivers that are out of contract at the end of this year. There's Vettel, Tsunoda, Joe, Albon, Schumacher, or Stroll. I'd love to know your thoughts. Which driver would you like me to make a video on? Whichever one gets the most votes in the comments down below, I'll do a deep dive in. We'll look at the statistics, we'll look at whether or not they deserve to be on the grid for the 2023 season. Whilst you're down there as well, leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and I will see you next time.